Residents near Dangkor Landfill reciprocate Tzu Chi's assistance at a recent distribution. We'll look at how Tzu Chi volunteers overcame obstacles to start charity work in Myanmar. Welcome to DaAi Headlines. I'm Sue. Thank you for joining us. The Dangkor Landfill in Phnom Penh, Cambodia is the only landfill for the 1.5 million population in the city. Hundreds of impoverished families living nearby make their livings by collecting garbage. Tzu Chi volunteers got a license last year to host free clinic and distribution at the landfill regularly.
The Dangkor Landfill in Phnom Penh, Cambodia normally has only garbage truck coming in and out and rarely anyone visiting. However, today there are a group of surprising visitors. They are Tzu Chi volunteers and they are setting up the venue for the free clinic and distribution here. Volunteers distribute rice, clothes, and shoes, as well as providing free clinics and haircut services.
The soap Tzu Chi distributed was very nice. I use it every day because it stops my itchiness. Tzu Chi gave me a huge one, and I cut it into little pieces to save money.
With previous experiences, landfill residents and volunteers are familiar with each other now. This time, Singapore volunteers also teach them some hygienic concepts so they can protect their health.
In the beginning, the children are very shy and don't dare to speak to us. Plus, we have language barriers, so we don't know what to do. Thankfully, some local volunteers help us to translate, and now they can lead the distributions by themselves.
I will tell my families that we must wash our hands after using the toilet and before having a meal. Also, we must be careful when collecting garbage at the landfill and beware of being cut by sharp items.
Volunteers love have received physical rewards. These impoverished residents donate their savings in the bottle-made coin banks.
I believe if I donate this money to Tzu Chi, they will use it to help more people in need. I'm very happy to be doing good deeds with Tzu Chi volunteers.
I can send them to the school because the school is open on October this year. Education is free. The things that the family should be assigned less money to buy the material, study material, or uniform.
Volunteers' care warms up landfill residents' hearts and lights up the future for these children.
In mid-April, a tornado swept through Virginia, USA, where the damage in Lynchburg was quite serious. A total of 250 households were destroyed, as 7 people were hurt. So the volunteers drove to the disaster site to distribute cash cards and food.
Tzu Chi volunteers put down everything and drove all the way to Lynchburg to comfort and care for the tornado-affected residents.
And it's been a nightmare ever since. I mean, literally, it's been a nightmare. Yeah. But I'm lucky to be here. Yeah. It's all the people over yonder. One's still in the hospital.
Can you remember it?
Tzu Chi teamed up with Red Cross and the local government to help conduct a small distribution at the local elementary sports arena for the affected residents. The residents could pick out the needed food items, and Panda Express was also there to deliver on-site hot meals. They also provided reusable utensils.
Oh, I have never seen that. That is fantastic. Yes.
Low-income households and many immigrants live in the nearby trailer parks, and the aftermath was not pretty. The houses were folded down or stacked up next to each other like Legos. Tzu Chi volunteers conducted individual home visits.
Probably, it's not that major, but we drove 3 hours.
Oh, I see.
Try to get here, try to express our sorrow.
The chaos that is created after a disaster is overwhelming, but the love and care from Tzu Chi volunteers is a sense of tranquility for those affected.
After Tzu Chi volunteers completed their free medical outreach in Coahuila, Mexico, they continued to hold a 2-day free clinic in Xochimilco. This time, Rotary clubs and charity organizations also joined the ranks of volunteers.
Today, we are here to continue our health fair.
A lot of people come from United States, but there won't be enough because we need local medical professionals as well. Together, I think we can serve a lot more people this time.
When I was 13 or 14 years old, I realized I wanted to be a psychologist, and I told myself I wanted to help people solve their problems.
I came for consultation and I like it. I like the way they treated me.
Ever since the earthquake, there has been phenomenon of post-traumatic stress. I try to make them cry to get it all out, although it may sound strange. If they keep all that fear, rage, or sadness inside, it will badly hurt them.
I believe we need their help very much, and I hope they'll come back soon to help us.
Rotary and Tzu Chi's missions are so similar, they are practically like our siblings.
Today we brought some doctors and we are here as translators too.
There are a lot of people ready to give before thinking about themselves.
We are happy to serve people here with lots of affection and love.
They injected me on this knee, the one that hurts most. I feel the pain has eased. I'm so happy because the volunteers left their homes to come and help us here in Xochimilco. We are poor.
We came here together. He received acupuncture and went to a neurologist. I came for general medicine. He has a brain hemorrhage.
Él tiene derrame cerebral. Ya es la segunda vez que vengo a curación aquí.
It's the second time I have come for treatment here. After I came here for the first time, my walking problems improved. Now I will see the results. I would like to get better because I have to work and be useful for my wife and myself.
Para que pueda yo ser útil para mí mismo y mi mujer.
We were all affected by the earthquake. They gifted us a card with 12,000 pesos, which helped us make some home repairs. The Council of Agriculture, the Forestry Bureau, and the Veterans Affairs Council began a project to revert farmland back into forests some 20 years ago. For example, Wuling Farm was planted with cherry trees to incorporate it with Xueba National Park. Some 8.1 hectares of land on both sides of Chijawan Creek were replanted in 2011. Returning to this area reveals a surprising scene, as all of these trees have disappeared.
Many think it's relatively simple converting former farmland back into forest, but a visit to Wuling Farm proves otherwise.
这边的草还是以外来种优势啦，包括像鬼针草啦，还有原生的一些芒草。
In the process of restoring the treasured Formosan landlocked salmon, this protected area around Chijawan Creek went from former farmland to wild weeds.
Silvergrass is very strong and hardy. Even if there are seeds from the nearby forest drifting in, there is probably no way for it to germinate.
像这一块地，它的草种又不一样。
Many places are still barren. This defies expectations, which had been based upon our first visit many years ago.
This work began in 2004 as all of these plantings are cherry blossoms. How big is the area that we planted? About 16 hectares on this side and over there another 8.1 hectares by the cherry park. So the total is about 24 hectares. Are these all cherry trees? Yes, that is correct.
7 years later, this is covered with gravel with only weeds surviving.
Most of this soil is simply stones, so it is hard to retain water. And if you look over here, you can actually see that the whole area is just gravel.
You can see that the soil here is very dry and then may be filled with a lot of gravel. Soil like this loses its ability to retain water. Small insects are in the soil, and without them, replanting trees here can be quite difficult.
这个都是石灰啊。哦，石灰。这都是石灰。哦。现在已经过了之后10年，还是到处都是，这个都是。
Long-term use of fertilizer has led to deterioration of the soil. was originally thought to be an accident, but no one thought the situation would be so serious.
The pH value of the soil has been changed dramatically, and nutrients have become unbalanced, and there was no seeds from the trees at all.
This large area has seen the soil affected, and in the past, seedlings planted here lasted for only half a year.
In the past, fallow farmland takes about 100 years to become forest again, according to our materials. But here, it may actually take a little longer.
However, it's not hard to find a natural forest. Just take a walk for 3 to 5 minutes.
就在走路不过3-5分钟的地方。
你看森林里面，它的腐殖质就很厚。
A healthy forest has soft and damp soil.
This soil is very abundant, and in this forest, there may be tens of thousands of seeds in 1 square meter of soil. But in fallow farmland, there may not be any seeds at all.
Tzu Chi frequently studies mud all day long. He believes that he can eventually find a way to bring back this dense forest. In addition to his work, the Forestry Bureau is also actively searching for ways to recover state-owned forest land.
Lisa was affected by the opening of the Central Cross Island Highway, which brought many people here who began farming the land. And from 2003 till now, about 95 to 96% of the land have been recovered. More than 300 hectares have been recovered now.
However, the area of woodland which needs to be reforested is quite large, and each area has its own characteristics. For example, Alison at the end of last year saw these illegally cultivated Japanese horseradish farms being reclaimed by the government. Although there wasn't a lot of damage from farming, many seedlings cannot survive after being planted.
In fact, when we do this reforestation work, there can also be some problems in some saplings, which reach 2 meters, they can still die.
Today, an evaluation team headed by Tzu Chi revisits the scene. Reforestation on this fallow land is a difficult battle. Aside from combating weeds, a number of conservation objectives also need to be met.
Before we planted seeds in the ground and waited for them to germinate. Now, about half a year later, we will mark it with bamboo poles.
Each of these saplings may become a big tree in the future.
In the past 2 years, about 50 species have been tested. We have taken a look at the local species of native trees to see which species are suitable for this type of fallow farmland. In the first year of our planting, the survival rate is probably only about 10%.
This team uses science to intensify their conservation measures.
We are using this netting to prevent the rabies munjat from eating it. You can also see, if you take a closer look, that we remove some of these weeds to prevent the area from being too dry and stop weeds from spreading. You can say that this is a special demonstration area.
Even if it takes a long time for a forest to grow back, these volunteers remain committed.
The goal here is that if another area wants to undertake reforestation on fallow agricultural land, they can look at our example of how we planted these trees. If they encounter the same conditions, they could potentially use our example to undertake reforestation.
After more than 2 years of hard work, these saplings continue to live, though they represent a much bigger matter, which is the hope for many that these forests can return. In the end, many are still looking for the right techniques to build forests out of fallow farmland.
Myanmar was once the largest exporter of rice, and rice remains the country's most crucial agriculture commodity. 10 years ago, in early May, Cyclone Nargis caused the worst natural disaster in the recorded history of Myanmar. In the aftermath of the flood, city volunteers from Malaysia and Thailand overcame many obstacles to enter Myanmar to assess damage. In Yangon of Myanmar, one can see the beautiful streets, a large number of temples, and British-style buildings. It was once the most magnificent city in Southeast Asia before World War II. Moreover, Myanmar was once the world's top rice exporter. In British writer George Orwell's novel Burmese Days, there was a description of the flood. In February to May of every year, the seasonal wind blows westward, followed by heavy rains that flooded everything. "80 years later, in May of 2008, Cyclone Nargis brought nonstop rain and flooded Irrawaddy Delta, devastating parts of the country. Back then, Time magazine and economists have both reported on the devastation of Myanmar. In the reports, it was mentioned that the Burmese junta would not open up and allow foreign aid to reach survivors of Cyclone Nargis. A week later, on May 8th, the first batch of UN's aid supplies were allowed to enter the country, but not the foreign media and aid organizations. On May 10th, the first NGO that was granted permission to enter Myanmar to assess damage was Taiwan's NGO Tzu Chi Foundation.
是，这知道。
你们第一天不要让我担心华爱的安全要照顾好，知道吗？
知道。
The 9-people disaster assessment team formed by Tzu Chi volunteers in Malaysia and Thailand has started Tzu Chi's charity work in Myanmar. For 10 years, Tzu Chi has taken root in Myanmar, witnessing how the Burmese government became democratic. What is remarkable is how the junta government had granted Tzu Chi the first permit to enter the country.
Before our permit was granted, I felt terrible. The master had said that a lot of Tzu Chi volunteers were on their way to help the disaster victims, but the government would not allow us to do it. I heard the master cried because of it. Upon learning of the news, I felt terrible. I did all I could, asking for help.
Despite the difficulties, the volunteers still carried out their charity work. Finally, the government extended the permit from 1 day to a month to a permanent one.
Now, if the government officials ask us who granted us the permission to carry out charity work here, we'd show them this permit. Once they see the permit, they would understand. This permit is really too important.
When Taiwan's Buddhist Tzu Chi Foundation, Master Zheng Yan's team, explained to me about their work, they said they are compassionate and vegetarian. I've seen what they have done and I believe them. Therefore, I granted them the permits.
In the aftermath of the disaster, when many NGOs started to leave Myanmar, Tzu Chi Foundation began to carry out further charity work in the country.
As the master helps Myanmar, she does a thorough job. The master has taught me that we not only have a start and end, but the work in between. I've remembered her words. I told our high-level government officials in Myanmar that the master carries out a thorough job. We're happy that Tzu Chi has carried out charity work in Myanmar. Now I think about Tzu Chi all the time. I will help out whenever I'm asked to do so.
Starting from scratch, Tzu Chi volunteers have taken root in Myanmar. 10 years later, there are currently about 400 local volunteers and more than 1,000 Tzu Chi's donating members. The seeds of love planted by Tzu Chi volunteers in Myanmar have sprouted and taken root in the country. The Chimpo industrial factory fire that took the lives of 5 firefighters brought many of its fellow firefighter brothers to the funeral home. Many of the different local NGOs, including Tzu Chi, were there to comfort the families. The representative of the Linko Bamboo Forest Temple and the deputy director of the Fire Bureau were both there to give their condolences.
Normally, it's hard to see a grown man cry. But when you have fought alongside someone whom you call even closer than a brother for the majority of your daily life, It is hard to hold back the tears. Every single firefighter that walked through that door had the same heartache written all over their faces.
Our firefighters are always giving their all to protect others under extreme conditions, heavy smoke, flames, and fire explosions. They are sacrificing their lives for the betterment and safety of society. They are what we call a real hero. In the future, we plan on improving our training programs, equipment, safety procedures, and leadership during a mission. We will continue to improve.
The firefighters are always prepared for life and death situations, but this does not hold true for their respective family members. The Deputy Director of the Fire Bureau, Xin Zhenzu, spent his time talking to each family that was involved in the fire incident. The Linggu Bamboo Forest Temple also donated 3 million NTD toward the families of the fallen firefighters. As for Tzu Chi volunteers, they were the first ones there on scene every day from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. They sincerely chanted and prayed for the fallen fighters' souls to rest in peace, all the while comforting the families.
All the Tzu Chi volunteers were the very first ones to arrive to comfort and care for the fallen firefighters' families and friends. Their physical presence and psychological support goes a long ways. It's safe to say that Tzu Chi is Taiwan's national treasure.
Every family has a group of volunteers assigned to them to care for them, to love them like their own. Even though the heart is still hurting, but strength is found when we give unconditionally.
Continuous support, love, and care from the volunteers are the biggest contributions Tzu Chi can give to the fallen firefighters' families.
Entomology professor Tang Li-zhen of National Zhongxin University was born with his right arm shorter than normal people. He discovered his interest in entomology during high school, and through diligent study, he's now an authority on the subject.
Tang Li-zhen makes the specimen skillfully. He was born with his right arm half shorter than normal, but it has not at all affected his teaching and research work.
Although he has only one hand to use, but his autopsy technique is still very good.
There are many new medications after World War II ended and has caused my arm to be like this. My father is a Catholic, and he insists to keep my arm because he said, I'm the little angel given from God.
His parents brought him up with love and have trained him to be independent. He has found his interest in entomology when he was in high school and has studied hard to attain his master's degree.
That time, I thought the best way to repay my parents is to show them my good grades. Also, I've always received scholarships to sustain my own living expense, so my parents don't need to shoulder another burden.
Tang Li-zhen is not only an entomology professor, he is also a tree doctor who majors in pest biocontrol. Last year, he was commissioned by Agriculture Bureau to check on 806 trees and to help farmers solve some bug problems.
There is so much research, and they are not just a report sitting there. We should use them to help more farmers and love our land.
Caring for the environment, Tang Li-zhen has never forgotten his responsibility to the society. Despite the disability of his right arm, his positive spirit and confidence has made him a person who contributes greatly to the society.
In Danshui of Taiwan, Danjiang University students have joined city volunteers to promote environmental concepts to the public. Their efforts have earned much positive feedback. We'll leave you with these images at the end of our program. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.